The Intel Arc Battlemage is finally here. Mostly. While I was waiting and excited for the B770 and hoping for any word of it, Intel instead gave us the B580. Shock, betrayal, and a lack of patience. I was hoping for the B770, not this watered-down lower-end offering. Peasant tier. I wanted a B770 Chad Emperor, especially after recently owning and testing the A770 for the short period that I did. The A770 Sparkle is such a pretty GPU with so much potential, but it just had too many issues, especially for content creation. And I already owned a 6700 XT that outclassed it for the same price point, so I had to return it. It just didn't make sense to keep. You can check out my video on the A770 if you want, but we are here for a Battlemage, not some old alchemist. Where was I? Right. But alas, we did not get the B770. Intel instead gave us the B580. The light in my eyes grew ever dimmer, and my yearning for the grave closer at hand. But not all hope was lost, because this Mage was no A580. No, this 12GB card came out swinging, even beating the A770. The more I saw, the more excited I was for it. This seemed like a genuinely good offering, and for $250 no less. We will ignore the fact it is still around my 6700 XT's performance. It is new and shiny. So there I was, staring at yet another GPU I did not need, but the pains of guilt I felt for returning the A770 weighed heavily on my conscience. The sweet temptation of a new GPU launch and the guilt of GPUs past, I had little choice. Nay, I had no choice. My path was clear. I had to get the B580. But on that faithful launch day, there was a great peril and stock was not so stocked. The B580 was sold out on launch. While there was some earlier pre-orders, it seemed that that was all there was. Websites that tracked GPU stock made it pretty clear that if you did not already get a pre-order, you were not getting this GPU. The little stock that did trickle in on the day of the launch and a few days after sat available for 5-minute intervals before the little supply was scooped up, and again the dreadful words of out of stock rang across the page. And most third-party models did not even get that. There was just no stock to begin with. Besides overpriced Gunnier cards on Amazon and Newegg that nobody would touch, or scalped cards being sold for over $400 plus on eBay, the options were limited. B&H had some pre-orders that you could place in limited stretches, but these two, you had to act quickly. Even those who lived near the holy land of Micro Center were having a hard time acquiring the B580. Some Micro Centers only carried 10 or less in stock, and once they were gone, they were gone. The card I coveted was the Sparkle Edition, my shiny blue boy. I had to have him. On the launch day of the 13th, I was lucky enough to secure my order. From the 13th to the 16th, the B580 Sparkle was only available for purchase on Newegg for a total of 3 hours, and once on Amazon on the 28th for a total of 5 minutes. And that was it. There are rumors that this was just a paper launch, that Intel did not intend to make or sell that many B580s. What I think, or what I hope, is that they had to rush the launch to get ahead of the other GPU launches, to not be overshadowed by NVIDIA and AMD, and in doing so, Intel did not have adequate supply. Whichever the case, the B580 has remained elusive several weeks after its launch. If you want more information on its launch and availability, I made a video covering the first 2 weeks of it on the market. Feel free to check that out. Installing the GPU was the same as installing any GPU. However, I don't know what it was or why, but plugging in the power cable to the B580 Sparkle took so much force. I have never struggled so hard to plug in a connector. It made plugging in NVIDIA's 12-pin connector a piece of cake. And poor Saya, it left marks all over her hands from her trying. And usually here I would just make a joke about her being too weak and frail, but it really was scary how much force it took to plug it in. I held the back of the GPU as I tried for a fear of breaking the motherboard and GPU connector. If I had to install it again, I would plug in the power cable before installing the card into the PC. I do not know if other cards are like this or just Sparkle, but it is worth noting for the sheer amount of effort and force it took. For some reason, I could not get Arc Control to download, or whatever Intel's new version is called. The drivers installed just fine, but Intel's scan that rebar is active kept failing to scan, and I already, in fact, had rebar on. I mention this because I assume this is how I would install the GPU control software. after passing this check. But this is just my assumption. I tried uninstalling and reinstalling the drivers several times, but I kept having the same issues. After looking up solutions, Intel was blaming the failed scan on the motherboard. So I updated my BIOS and reinstalled the drivers, and still no luck. I could not even readily find it with a great Google search. I'm at a bit of a loss. Apparently the software is supposed to all be bundled into the driver's download, but it is just not present on my computer. I can't say I have had this problem with AMD or NVIDIA. Why is this so elusive? And if I somehow manage to miss something major, it just does not seem very user-friendly. I even extracted the installer itself to see what it contained, and in its resources I found no graphics software. Everything I did brought me back to the Intel driver and support assistant, which opened in a browser. And this thing did nothing for me. How has Intel gone backwards since the Alchemist series for its software? I feel like I am beta testing the Battlemage here, and all I get is some basic drivers and thumbs up from Intel and told go test the GPU for them. Even the support assistant you do get. It's not an actual program, it's just a browser extension of sorts. Intel has given me no way to control my new GPU, to see its temps or set a fan curve or overclock it. And from what I have seen, I am not the only one with this issue, although there are only few that have this card yet, so it makes it hard. And where did I finally find the elusive Intel Graphics Command Center? From the Microsoft Store. Why? Oh, why, of all places, was the Microsoft App Store the only place I could actually download this? And worse, they removed its recording feature. In fact, it had no useful features to use. At best, we could see that we in fact have a B580 installed and the software is up to date. I am not even sure this is the right program. For testing, we have a 180Hz 1440p monitor as our main screen, with a little 60Hz 1080p travel monitor plugged in as our secondary screen. Spec-wise, we have a Ryzen 7900X as our CPU, and it is accompanied by 32 GB of DDR5 RAM at 6000 MHz. This system is up there, and will give the B580 plenty of room to reach its full potential. With all that out of the way, let's get to the games. Playing Fortnite on all Epic settings with TSR Epic, we got around 30 to 40 FPS, and I would not recommend it. Putting the settings to high and keeping TSR to Epic did help us get around 60 FPS, but it was not super smooth. I would show you, but the recording froze on the menu as we tested it, and Saya refused to play at 30 FPS again to show you all what it looked like. She is just not a team player. Keeping the settings at high and putting TSR to high did help, but there was still FPS drops, and even when there wasn't, the game just didn't feel smooth, and this feeling continued even when we switched to medium TSR and medium settings. But I think this can be contributed to a power outage, resetting the monitor's refresh rate from 180 Hz to 60. It may have also explained some screen tearing I was seeing, but I honestly don't remember if I saw this before or after the outage. It's all a blur, so as a friendly PSA, if your power ever goes out, always double-check your monitor's refresh rate, as it can reset. As Saya was tweaking the settings more, she was very rudely interrupted. The audacity! The final settings that made the game feel comfy to play, Saya's words, not mine, was TSR medium on quality, with all medium settings, and epic view distance, but turning down global illumination and reflections to ambient occlusion and screen space, respectively. After that, there was slight FPS drops here and there, but the game was playable and fine. I will be honest. I was expecting the B580 to perform better here, especially after just seeing how well the RX 6700 XT performed in our Lunchbox PC, which is a weaker system spec-wise. That PC was able to run Fortnite on TSR medium with high settings and epic view distance and get around 120 to 144 FPS on average. And here with the Battlemage with a better PC and lower settings, we are around 65 to 80 FPS, and sometimes 80 to 100 FPS if we were lucky. The B580 and the 6700 XT are comparable and can trade blows, with the 6700 coming out slightly on top according to most benchmark averages, and from my own tests I have seen that as well. It is also interesting to note that Fortnite set all my settings to Epic when I opted for it to auto-set my graphics in the menu, although I am not sure if Fortnite was picking the settings for the old GPU I had in this system, the 7900 GRE. But I thought it was interesting to note. Right, moving on. Grand Theft Auto 5 ran very well. Running this game on the default settings it chose for us caused stuttering. But in this case, that's not a bad thing. That is because when GTA runs too well, and there is 180 plus FPS, the game dies. I guess there can be too much of a good thing. Setting a frame cap fixed this, but I wanted to see how the GPU handled GTA on max settings. With everything maxed, we got around 40-ish FPS, but the game experience still felt smooth. I did not know if the frame counter was lying to me. Very sus MSI afterburn, very sus. I am sure it was accurate, but I did turn down some settings to get better frames, and that brought us to 50 to 60 FPS. Oh, right. When I put all the settings to max, the recording got about 1 to 3 FPS, but I did not find this out until after. Swapping the video encoder from Intel's AV1 to X264 fixed this issue. We just had to make our CPU work harder. Why didn't I think of that? Right, where was I? Confused what setting was eating so much of the FPS, I played with the settings for a bit and realized it was MSAA as the culprit. MSAA is multi-sampling anti-aliasing and it makes things less jagged. Turning that down, or just turning it off, gave us back our frames and allowed us to keep everything else on max settings. It also allowed us to record at full FPS again, with the AV1 encoder. Very exciting. The last thing I wanted to test with the B580 with this game was GTA's built-in benchmark. When I last tried this on an Intel GPU, the A770, we got a choppy max of 20 FPS experience, and I was so confused why the benchmark hated the A770. But I was pleasantly surprised to see the B580 handle the benchmark with no issues on our max settings. Rocket League runs amazing on this GPU. Running on max settings and unlimited frames, you are looking at 300 plus FPS. I also want to mention here how cool the B580 runs. At most, we got to 61 Celsius. When I have used Rocket League to test other GPUs, running unlimited frames usually adds about 10 degrees to the card's running temp. The B580 had no such issue here, but I guess when the PCB is half the size of a normal GPU's PCB and the other half is all fans and heatsink, it makes sense it would be cooler. I also have the Sparkle version, which runs cooler than Intel's limited edition card. What a cool, sparkly boy.
So what brand RAM do we have here? Okay, so we got Samsung RAM. They are tied into the cooler right here. The cutest little VRM links that you've ever seen. But look at the size of this cooler for something so efficient. Yeah, I might as well clean that die off real quick so we can kind of take a look at it. So this really does give me hope that they might be able to scale this up.
The B580's performance in Cyberpunk was super impressive. Without any upscaling or frame generation, you can run this game on the Ultra preset at 61 FPS. With the low preset for ray tracing, you could run and almost reach 60 FPS with no upscaling or frame gen. I have compared this GPU to the 6700 XT, and although in Fortnite the 6700 XT had a stronger performance, here the B580 beats it out handedly. So far from the games I have tested, this performance has impressed me the most. And even with using upscaling, Intel's supersampling looks solid. While Intel's own upscaling software will work with AMD and NVIDIA, it works especially well on Intel Arc cards, which are able to leverage its dedicated cores to better optimize its upscaling capabilities. I will post all the graphs of our Cyberpunk benchmarks here. I ran them on each preset, and with and without upscaling and frame gen. Feel free to pause so you can get a better look if needed. I will also include the 6700 XT's performance as well, so you can get an idea of how well the B580 performed here. The 6700 XT is no slouch, and can be considered slightly better than the B580 in most cases, but the B580 destroys it here. Playing Hitman and messing around with its settings, I noticed something. For whatever reason, this game looks awful without adaptive supersampling on. Characters' faces look pixely, and the hair looks like it's wiggling and slightly moving and jagged. When supersampling is turned on, that all smooths out. I am not really sure what's going on here. You would think it would work the other way around. It's almost like when I turn it off, the game is defaulting to the worst quality versus me turning it on and setting it to quality. It feels like the game was optimized to run with supersampling, and not using it makes the game look really bad. I don't know if I can blame the B580 for this, or maybe it's just how the Hitman's devs optimized the game. I would have to double-check by turning it on and off on other systems, but it is not a huge issue, since turning it on causes no problems, and the game looks good. That being said, and ignoring that weird issue, we can run Hitman on all its highest settings and play the game fine. Depending on the area and visuals, we could get anywhere from 60 to 140 FPS, and usually it was above 70 frames. Although turning on ray tracing will drop us to around 20 FPS, and I would avoid it. Or not, feel free to do whatever. I am a robot, I have no authority over you. I can't even control the cat that ruins my life. I was not sure how the B580 would perform with this title. It's brand new and considered brutal on GPUs and what it requires of a system. It has built-in ray tracing, there is really no turning it off. And that means if your GPU is not capable of ray tracing, you cannot play this game. Despite this game's graphical requirements, and the B580 being considered an entry-level graphics card, to my surprise, our Battlemage handled this title well. Running on high settings, we got an average of around 60 FPS, with some dips of 40 in more intensive areas. But even when we had 40 FPS, the gameplay felt smooth, and the game and graphics looked amazing. We were running on all high, so you could most certainly turn down settings, but as a single-player title, the times we were at 40 FPS did not bother me. In fact, if I did not have a frame counter on, I might not have even noticed. On a side note, the game was a lot more fun than I was expecting, so there was that. Switching the graphics to Supreme, we certainly had some lower dips, but besides those, we were still getting around 60 FPS for the most part. Although personally, I think I will stick to high settings and perhaps a few sliders to medium to keep our frames consistent. If you want to see more of this card's performance with this title, you can check out Saya's gameplay test of it, where for an hour she did not talk but just played the game. What a blessing from the creator. World of Warcraft played just fine on the B580. Like all systems I test WoW on, World of Warcraft is a mixed bag of performances. You will see huge FPS drops in the expansion's main cities, big frames outside of the city, and raid battles can take big hits, if not as big as the city. The game is not super well optimized, and that should be kept in mind. At any rate, the B580 handled medium-high settings in WoW, 7 out of 10 on the graphics slider, very well. In the main expansion city, we saw anywhere from 60 to 70 FPS. Outside the city, we could see anywhere from 100 plus to 200 plus frames. For raids, it depends on the fight. On average, in what I saw for the B580, we got anywhere from 60 to 90 FPS in raid battles, with a few dips below 60. And before I can sum up the experience of this GPU for World of Warcraft, we must again perform the ultimate benchmark. That is right, let us zoom into a rock. It never gets old, look at that FPS counter, simply amazing. Is this joke old yet? No, it can't be. It is not me that is out of touch, it is everyone else. At any rate, the B580 plays WoW very well. And once more I was able to record it with OBS and not have it be unwatchable, as was the case with the A770. I mean, look at the A770's performance here. That is not very PogChamp. Not very PogChamp at all? Right, moving on. I wanted to test HELLDIVERS 2 on the B580 because I have seen people complain about the performance of the Alchemist series in this game. As well, I have seen questions about Battlemage's performance while striving for democracy, all of which made me curious as well. How well can our B580 handle HELLDIVERS? When I loaded up the game, our graphics settings were set on ultra texture quality, with mostly high and some medium setting sliders. In-game we saw 60 to 70 FPS, This game actually got our GPU up to 63 Celsius as well, which for most games we rarely saw it above 60. The B580 handled this game well, and there were no issues in the mission Sire played. With the Battlemage, you can spread democracy without fear of your GPU failing you. Whatever issues Alchemist had, they seem to be gone with the B580. We will ignore the fact Sire went to a bug-infested planet and drowned. Not embarrassing at all. We will make sure not to highlight that fact, or the fact that when someone joined her game to help, she blew them both up. No, we will not mention those facts at all. We have higher standards here than making fun of a cat with skill issues. We are mature and far too classy for that. What a noob. Now that we covered those games, we can move on to the synthetic benchmarks. Sire assured me she could handle this part, so I guess I will let her. I guess. To be honest, I don't really have a choice, she threatened.
Alright, so you went ahead and ran the B580 through 3D Mark and Furmark. The results may shock you. Probably, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know what a lot of these mean.
What? You said you prepared a lot for this and could handle it.
I say a lot of things, like boat, banana, car, shoebox, lemon squeezy. So first, we have a 3D Mark test. In Port Royal, as you can see, the system could not handle both recording and OBS and running it at the same time. I can assure you though, it did not look like this when we were benchmarking it. We'll just skip ahead here, and here we have Speedway recorded with the H.264 encoder on OBS. You know, this isn't very speedy. The recording also does not look very great. Here, let's just go to the score. Is this good? I don't know, the benchmark says good, so yay! The B580 passes, hooray! Lastly, we have a Chat Steel Nomad. Oh god, this thing sucks at recording and doing this test.
We actually did try to use the capture card here to record it and show how we saw it on our end. But 3D Mark was not a fan of this method and would not run the benchmark.
Hey, this is my turn. Do not interrupt. Right, so we will skip ahead here and, here's that score. My god, it doesn't say good. I think we have failed the test. I don't know. There's some squiggly lines or something. So many details. Oh no, it didn't show the squiggly lines for the speeder one. There's the squiggly lines for this 3D Mark one. Robot, you handle Furmark.
Right. For Furmark, we tested both Furmark GL and Furmark VK at 1440p respectfully.
GL stands for King Sterling Greenie, and VK stands for Viper King.
What? Where do you even come up with this?
Come up with what? That is what they stand for.
Right, well, I don't know why I even bother to ask. Let's just move on to the scores.
Here you can see the scores, and how they compare to other GPUs. Ignore the ones that are higher than ours. They clearly cheated. They're not even true King Sterling Greenie testers.
No, they did not cheat. And it gives users a good idea of how the B580 stacks up against other cards. It's very useful. Do not spread misinformation.
You sound like a real Viper King.
I sound like no such thing.
You sound like a nerd.
Right, well, I think that's enough for Furmark. In this video, we have compared the RX 6700 XT to the B580 several times, but I want you to consider this. On its launch, the MSRP of the 6700 XT was $480. It was not received well for what it offered for the amount of money it cost. That was in 2021. Now, at the end of 2024, well, basically 2025, we got the B580 at an MSRP of $250. While some of this price lowering can be contributed to improvements in technology, one should not underestimate or rule out the greed of GPU manufacturers. You do not have to look further than the RTX 4060 from NVIDIA to see this point. For how it performs, the Intel Arc B580 is an amazing deal at $250, especially coming in with 12 GB of VRAM. Even marked up prices by partner models. It's an amazing card for under $300, especially since the 6700 XT at that price point, which has become a favorite of budget builders, becomes harder to come across new since it is no longer produced. I have been thoroughly impressed by the B580 and how it has handled new and graphically intensive titles. For $250, it also performs better than the A770, which launched at an MSRP of $349. This is an entry-level GPU, and I know at the moment it is very hard to get a hold of, but if you have been waiting for a new GPU to buy and upgrade to, and you do not want to spend an insane amount, this is the card for you. You get new Intel tech, AV1 encoders, and a chance to support an up-and-coming GPU manufacturer. So many want competition in the GPU market, but do not help support the competition. I know I am doing my part. I now have graphic cards from NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel. That means I can shit-talk any company with immunity, right? Take that, fanboys, I am untouchable! I have an infinity gauntlet of graphic cards. Sorry, I got a little carried away. Overall, the fact that this is only the second generation of Intel's Arc series and the B580 is considered an entry-level GPU and performs this well, I'm excited for what Intel cooks next. And that's not to say it is perfect or without its flaws, but it's $250. I mean, come on, that is insane for what you get. And as drivers are optimized, performance should go up. While this card has impressed me so far, I still want to test it with older games and titles, which the last gen of Arc cards struggled with. So stay tuned for that video where we will run through a bunch of older titles and see how the Battlemage does. But for now, thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe if you found anything helpful or enjoyed the video.
And if any of you made it this far in this video, thank you so much. You are my Pog chimp. My little Poggy Woggy. Poggers! Bye-bye. Meow.
And Sparkle charged me $11 for shipping off of New Egg.
This is outrageous. It's unfair.
It's downright despicable.
How can you be on the council and not be a master?
This is outrageous. It's unfair. How can you be on the council and not be a master?
A little Poggy Woggy.
Meow meow through the screen, digital cats in a dream. Pixel hearts racing fast, in this world love will last.